Hello. Greetings. Welcome to JavaScript. I am Justin Love. I am one of the organizers. And Justin Meyer is so technically an organizer.
Yeah, technically.
Yeah, he started it, he still sponsors it. They're the ones, the guys who actually got this thing going. And Jankar is unfortunately not here tonight, but he's actually doing most of the organizing locations and speakers and stuff. So I'm very grateful for that as well. Anyway, welcome. Did everybody get food and drink? Cool. All that and the space for the let's get them in hand. And why are you doing that?
Hey everyone. Hey, welcome to Innova. We're a lending company for consumer and business. So I'm a software engineer on one of the teams. We're doing a lot of fun things with microservices, breaking down the monoliths. So we're always looking for help. So please check in by the time you leave. Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right, so our main event tonight is Justin Meyer with Crud. So Can is they were like a JavaScript consultancy before when JavaScript was becoming cool. And this is like the framework that they built to do all of those projects. And it's just gone through many revisions since then. Right? Yeah, Justin Meyer, well, back here.
Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, just a reminder, there's t-shirts in the back. You should get them now because at the end of this, everybody's going to be so pumped up about CanJS that there's going to be like a mad rush for them. So I'm just saying, get it now while the getting is good. Thank you, Justin. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for having me. I think another talk fell through, so I'm happy to get the opportunity to talk to all of you tonight. What I'm going to be showing is, or what we're going to be building today, is this basic Crud application. And Crud is an acronym meaning create, read, update, and delete. Sometimes retrieve for R people use. I'm an originalist, OG, so I use read. And this app, just to go over real quick, does all those things. I can create to-dos. I can update them, update their dates. I can delete them. And the read is just me, I can load them from a server and display them. How many people here have built a Crud app? Everybody, because that's all apps are. Almost every single app is really just a fancy Crud app. Even taking something like CodePen itself, while a lot of its most complex code is of course in like the rich the code editor, managing these iframes and things like that. If you dig into CodePen enough, right? Like you look at your dashboard, what is this but this is a way you can edit some of this, but it's really just the R in Crud of listing all of your pens. And each one of these pages is just another mini Crud app. So Crud is everywhere. It's all around us. And CanJS is really a framework designed around building Crud applications, getting them out the door rather quickly. And with release of 5.0, which talks about here, we added some pretty cool new features to make bootstrapping Crud applications really fast. So before we get into building it, I'm going to go over just some of the features of this, because it's not just like your basic Hello World Crud application. It does a lot of the things that you would expect of a professional application, such as like when I click delete, it says deleting and it's disabled, so I can't just keep clicking it. While to-dos are, it's paginated, right? So I can show 20 items, I can show them all. Notice it says loading there while it's loading. You can sort by the name or due date, and you can filter by saying, okay, I want to see everything that's incomplete due today. Now there's some stuff I think that's even more impressive that this does, that's rather tricky. And if I sort, I'm going to sort by due date. And you'll notice if I edit a to-do, so walk carpet, if I edit it and move it into the future, which is sorted by date, it'll change location. So I'm going to make it do the 24th. And you'll notice, well, carpet got moved into the right spot, right? That'll happen also if I create something. So I'll do the 21st. So well, I'll do it the 25th, so it kind of appears in the middle. Learn CanJS. I'll say complete. Create it 25th. And you'll see Learn CanJS just appeared in the right spot. Getting all of that to work in a normal app takes a lot. But with these somewhat simple 13 steps we'll be doing, we'll have built all of that functionality. So if you are really adventurous, you can follow along with this guide right here. These kind of guides, if you do like this sort of thing, I do a lot of at the DoneJS Chicago meetup, which I'll put a link to at the end of this. We kind of go through example apps like this and build them. But those are written up a little bit nicer so a layman could go through it without needing me, but I'll be here for you if you are going through it. So this also uses Bootstrap. Who's used Bootstrap here? Almost everybody, okay. Because yeah, that's a great way to get up something that looks relatively nice. And by the way, it's totally okay to stop me and ask questions. This is mostly me building things. If there's something that I'm not explaining well, just stop, raise your hand, and I'll do my best to explain what's going on. Okay, so we're really just going to start off building a basic CanJS application, or bootstrapping one, if you will. CanJS apps work by you essentially define custom elements, right? So I'm going to define a to-dos list custom element, and then that actual custom element would be auto-mounted by CanJS. So I'm going to copy-paste here and then kind of go through what I'm doing. I'm actually going to modify it a little bit so it makes more sense. Yes, that's the DoneJS CLI, which includes things like server-side rendering, module loading, stuff like that. Okay, so let me just do a hello world of what a CanJS hello world looks like. So this is the most hellish of hello worlds. I don't know. All I've done is I've put a to-do list in the page, and I imported component from CanJS. This is using the new ES modules. I've been lucky enough to use them natively. Nobody. Who's used them with Webpack? So this is actually using the native browser support. So I'm just importing it from the unpackaged CDN, CanJS, and I'm pulling out its component API, which with it I can use to define a custom element. So in its view, anything I put in here shows up here. So if I put this in like an H2, it says hello world. The view model is really where your data and your methods live. If I wanted to make this a counter, so I'm going to make something that just increments when I click the H2. I can define a count property with a default value of 0 and an increment method that updates that. And then I can, hopefully that's not too low for everybody. Let me move this up here. Now I just need to call the increment method from my view. On click, I want to call increment. And I'm also going to write out the count. So with that, as I click this H2 element, it counts. Essentially what's happening is the view is able to call methods on the view model and also write out properties of the view model, and that's all that's really happening is as I click this, it calls increment down here, increments the count, and the count updates. Like almost every framework ever. But we'll see where CanJS is different in a second. One place where it's different is how it deals with promises. Because what's going on in here is JavaScript-like, but not JavaScript exactly. We can do things that, like, React couldn't do, such as like understand stateful mechanics of promises without having to kind of translate that state into like set state calls. So what I mean by that is here on my view model, I'm going to make a to-do's promise property. And this is just going to create a promise that resolves with an array of data. Nothing really special here if you're familiar with promises. So here, I'm creating a promise. Promises take a callback for when they are, and you can call that resolve callback when you want to give that promise a value. And here, after 2 seconds, I'm resolving it with an array. Missed up the. Okay, oh, keep going. Okay. Now, what CanJS's view can do here is it understands the state of promises, and there's kind of virtual. It allows you to read and access virtual properties of promises. So in this case, it makes it very easy to, as this promise is being resolved. Here, I'll put a space. While it's loading, the state is pending. It will write out that loading. You can see it says, "Come on." Sometimes you space. Save. Can I go up? They don't have a run button, which is really kind of annoying. I will force it to have a run button. Oh, internet. Code pen is broken. The joys of live programming. Wait, they work. Okay, there we go. Is anybody downloading something huge on this network? You start the hardware. Problem is I can't switch to my phone because then we'll lose that. Restart here. Now is the time to go to an HTML page. Oh, there we go.
Nice.
All right, I'm going to go to a local, I'm going to host locally. Hooray. Sorry about this, everybody. I don't know what just brought down code pen. Yeah, I'm going to turn it on. Okay, there it comes. It's going to work this time for the rest of this presentation. Okay, I don't trust it at this point. I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna switch to admin. Maybe, but I can just copy that. of it as a setting, like Bootstrap. It's going to look like we'll have to eventually figure out how to make Bootstrap work here. It's in my settings. It wasn't part of the HTML that I was copying. But that is fine. Do this. Script tag. Type equals module. Here. Oh, I need to be doing all this here. I was just doing it locally, but you can't see what I'm doing. I guess I can just plug it. It's not gonna work. It's working out. Oh, there it goes. Hooray! All right. Okay. So so after all that, I just wanted to show that while all the promise was pending, it was saying loading. And now hopefully, if I hit space, okay, it's refreshing now. All right. And then how this works is if the promise is resolved, once it's actually resolved and has its data. There's a for loop here that just loops through every to-do in that promise, the promise's resolved value, and writes out its whether it's complete or not, the name, and the due date. And then if there are no items, it would actually write out, because of this handy little else branch here, no to-dos. Now one thing you'll notice is for the data that I'm creating, I created a few different types of date representations, like serializable date representations. I created this string form, which sometimes people pass, and I also created like the Julian number timestamp. Who likes to pass from the server like a string that represents their date? Anybody do that? Okay, and then who passes this number? Other people. Yeah, I've heard like tabs versus spaces arguments for both of these. I'm more this side just because the number feels better to me, but I go both ways. All right. So let's do the next thing, which is really to set up what I think is CanJS's biggest differentiator, which is a framework, is its model layer. So I'm going to create models that start to add more and more power and make things easier and easier for us. The first problem I'm going to solve is I'm going to take whatever date type format we're getting, I'm going to make sure it gets converted to an actual date, a JavaScript date. So then I can use like get locale date string to print out the date instead of just kind of relying upon whatever the server sent back. So for this, show what we're going to do here. I'm going to import the key value map type model. So this is defined, this allows us to create key value observables and model their behavior and their types and things like that. And also an array of list-based observable that allows us to model arrays, kind of create custom list types. And instead of just dealing with raw data, I'm going to be dealing with this model data. And that'll have a lot of advantages as we actually start adding functionality to this widget. But for now, all I'm going to do is instead of just having raw data here resolving with that, I'm going to resolve with a to-do list. Now everything is in a date, and if you just pass a date to the view, it just renders it as like a string. But now I can use that to locale date string method. And now we start seeing pretty dates. So that's just one reason to use models. We're going to start adding more and more. So the next thing I'm going to do is, instead of making this kind of like fake promise that resolves here, which kind of would happen if we were using fetch, you know, if we're making, or what's that other popular Ajax library that we're using? Huh?
Axios.
Yes, Axios. Like if you were using Axios, instead of faking that like this, I'm going to fake it a better way. And that is, I'm going to fake a service layer, an entire service layer, like a RESTful service layer in the client. And this is actually really, I work for Bitovi again, as Justin mentioned. We do soft JavaScript consulting. Very often, and I wonder if this happens to other people, we're working and the back end isn't even done yet. They're like, hey, we got to build all this functionality, but the back end team hasn't finished. We use Fixture to simulate the APIs that they'll be building. So we can start getting work done now and kind of work in parallel to the back end. Has anybody ever had to do that, like work in parallel with the back end team? A few people? Yeah, kind of. It's terrible. They always blame you when it ships late because they'll get it done like a week before, and they're like, but it's the UI's fault. This kind of helps avoid that. Okay, so I'm gonna fake it till they make it with this mock. I'm going to make a little mock service function. I'm putting it here because I want to have my UI code at the top, and I'm kind of putting a function that I'll call right away after I have my to-do. So all I'm really doing here is I'm taking that data that we had above and making kind of like a little mini database with it, this to-do store on the client. And this little database can be filtered and paginated and sorted just like you would a normal database. And then I can say, hey, connect this URL. If anybody tries to make an Ajax request to these URLs, get, put, post, delete, connect that to the data store. So like fake data coming back from here. And if someone mutates it, update the records in that store. So with that, now I can actually make just a normal Ajax request for that data. So I'm going to use CanJS has its own kind of like Axios type thing. This works with Axios too. You could anything that uses the XHR object would be totally fine. But I don't want to show using the XHR object right now and converting that to promises and everything. That's a lot to do. So let me figure out where's the right place. So, okay. So there, now we're just making an Ajax request to API to-dos, but the server, but our fixture is just going to trap that and then give back the data that we put in here. So that's handy, and now we're just creating a to-do list from that. Okay, I want, because we're going to be doing sorting and filtering and things like that, I don't want just 3 items, I want 100 items so that we can actually play with a more realistic amount of data. So I'm going to enhance this fixture a little bit, and I'll go through what this code does. Essentially, this code is just going to randomly generate 100 to-dos. So I've got terms, verbs, subjects, and I'm essentially just kind of randomly combining those with a date, and also I'm randomly combining those to make phrases like take out perfect, organize your taxes. Sometimes there's funny ones, but everything else is kind of normal right now. It's basically making 100 to-dos in our 100 randomized to-dos, and they have random dates between a week ago and 4 weeks in the future. And Fixture has this random function that allows you to kind of do like randomized selection, which is pretty handy here. But I'm not going to go into that. The real important thing about it, though, is we pass in this to-do. And now I'm going to get a little technical real quick for those who are kind of curious about how this works. CanJS has a kind of like an internal type system a little bit. Like when you say type number, we understand that that is a maybe number. That means the ID can be, well, in this case, it's not actually totally what you want. You want it to be, it can only be a number. This means that IDs can be a null, an undefined, or a number. And essentially, that schema can be read just from that to-do, and then it kind of creates its own, it using that schema information, it knows how to filter and sort and do everything with whatever data comes from here. Was used to create the to-do store. So it's like CanJS kind of carries around some information with it like a type-safe language. Okay, so now we're starting to get things set up for real. The final thing is, instead of having to manually do this kind of conversion all the time, CanJS can turn this into not just like a type, an observable type, but what we call a real model, modeling your data on the back end. And there is a few different versions of this. The most simple one is REST model. And if you pass REST model, it's kind of like a mix-in that supercharges a type that you've built. If you pass it in a type, in this case to do, and you pass it in a URL, in this case it's going to be API, a RESTful URL, to-dos ID. And then it adds all of these methods to to-do that understand creating, updating, deleting data. So instead of having to fetch things like this, I can just do return to-do.getList and pass it whatever parameters I want for filtering and sorting and things like that, right? Just by default, you don't pass it anything right at the object, it just gets everything. So now we have a model. And with that, we can start doing a lot of fancy things. So just to kind of recap, this is the base level setup. You create a type for your data, whatever you're pulling back from the server. You define that type, and then you can supercharge it with this REST model that will have a bunch of methods that we'll use to create data, update data, do things like that. I'm also mocking the backend server so that we don't actually have one, but it seems like there is one.
How does that pick it up? The mock?
So it actually overwrites the XML HTTP object, and it creates a proxy to the real one, and then it just sees whatever you're making requests with, and then if those requests match like the URLs that you supplied here, then it doesn't actually go to the server. And I do want to pat myself in the back real. Well, I'll do it. The log is getting too large. Oh, that's too bad. Oh, I know why. I'll pat myself in the back a little bit later, or maybe I'll just do it right now real quick. It's too small. I'll pat myself in the back later. It's basically, it gives you these really nice, like, because it doesn't work with the network tab, you can't really see it, but it gives you this nice, like, oh, you try to get API to-dos. Here's your request. It was an empty object that you used. But here's your response. This is, oh, was it 200? You can't really read it, but it's saying that it's like a 200. Here's the data that came back. So it's pretty nice to use, right? It tells you when it's tracking stuff. Okay. Any other questions? Hopefully everybody's shoes are tied. I told you about that mad dash. It's about to get even cooler in a second. Okay, so first we're going to add paginating. We're going to make it so we can. Let me open up the final example here, just so we can see what it's going to do. This isn't like a full pagination, but you'll see while we're making this pagination work how you would make any sort of pagination work. We're only doing the kind of like, you can see everything 5 items or 20 items. But if you want to do the kind of like move to the next page, it all works the same way. You're just changing numbers around. So as we add filtering and pagination and sorting, we're going to repeat the same process pretty much every time. First thing is we need a select in our to-do list. So I'm going to kind of put a form for all of the kind of filtering, pagination, query, selector kind of stuff. So here's my form control. I have a select, and it's going to have an all, a 5, and a 20 as options. And what I want to do is I'm going to connect that to a view model count property. You can see count right here. I'm going to connect that to a view model count property, and then when this select changes, it's going to update count, and we're going to make it so that when count updates, it's going to request more data. So let's see how that works. So this step. Oh, this is the final one. Let's get that out here. Okay, so to make this work, we need to define the property, the count property, so we can manipulate it and CanJS knows about it. We're going to say it's a type string and its default is 5. Because the DOM is in strings, CanJS has ways of dealing with that, like converters, but I'm going to ignore that for this. So I'm just going to say the default value is 5. You can see it's selected 5 here. And then I changed to-do's promise. Previously, it was just calling to-do get list with whatever, with an empty object. And then you'll see over here, it's going to show all items again. What we want it to do is change when the count changes. So here, I'm creating a query object with a filter. We'll worry about that later. We don't actually need that for now. We will need it later. But with a query object, and then if we have a count, then add a page property to the query that starts at 0 and then ends at whatever the count is minus 1. By default, CanJS assumes you have inclusive ranges. So you're loading 0 to 9. That's actually loading 10 items. So that's why it's subtracting 1 here. And now, look at, we have pagination. And all you would have to do if you wanted like next page, previous page, is do the same kind of thing, just make it so that your start is changing. Here, I could even make it so if I comment some of this stuff out here, and now no matter what I'm setting the query page, if I set it to like 3 to 7, that should load 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5 items. It's inclusive. It says 5 up here, but that's ignored. It's really loading the 3rd item that was created. Any questions about that? Make sense? Clear as mud? Cool. Okay, so now let's add sorting. Sorting, again, pretty much the exact same thing for these next 3 steps. For sorting, I'm going to add another select. And this time it's going to be connected to a sort property. And then we're either sort, none means like we want to make the sort property equal to empty string, name, we want to sort by name, or due date, we want to sort by the due date property. So let's change. Now all we need to do is add another stateful property. So this will be sorts. We want to add it as a string. And here in our to-do's promise, we're just going to check if there is a sort property. Then I'm going to add to the query a sort property that is whatever the sort was set up here. So if I select name, should have sorted this dot sort. Let me see my answer. Is it green? Did it put this in your view? But it's not refreshing, see? That is the problem. Let me open up another one. Oh, Cloudflare. Does this have a text editor on it? Probably not. Huh? Oh boy. It's been like 12 years. I don't think it would be very effective. Let's see. Now space. All right, there we go. Name. Sorted by name. Yes. Sorted by due date. Now let me see everything sorted by due date. I have a lot to do. All right. So let's do the next thing I have to do, which is to make filtering. I want to make it so I can filter by complete or incomplete. Keep rocking the same process. Here I'm going to make a select. So I'm going to make another select element. In this case, I'm going to bind to a complete filter property. So complete filter on the view model will be set to idiomatic JavaScript to have the, or CanJS to have the this dot in front of it. But I'm going to set it to the, I'm going to update the complete filter property of the view model. So let me add, oh, of course I'm editing final right now, so I added just 2. Let me go back to the one that we're working on. Okay, so here's the complete filter property. And we want to make it so that when the complete filter property, if there is a complete filter property, oh, I actually want to define it too. String. And then when there is a complete filter property, I want to add to the, within one of the filters of this query, I want to set complete to either true or false. Complete, as you noticed, was being set, well, you might have noticed, I'm talking very quickly. Complete is either going to be set to, complete filter is going to be either set to the string complete or the string incomplete or to an empty string. So if the string was complete, then we want to be complete, we want to filter for complete true. Hopefully that makes sense. Essentially, you could think of it as like if we want to set the query.filter.complete to true. If complete filter equals complete. So I'm gonna, so if that is equal to complete, and if it was set to incomplete, complete would be set to false. So here, now I should be able to show complete ones, should be able to do trues here, and incomplete ones, only falses. Yeah.
Is it possible for someone to change the view model outside of the DOM? And the DOM update to reflect the changes of the view model?
Yes. Would you like me to? Because I can do that. Let me, so if, it's going to be a little hard to see because zoom up as much as I can here. Let me find that, okay, so here I click to-do list, and here, if you get nothing else from this meetup, I'm about to show you that once you click an element, if you do $0, that is that element you just clicked on. If you didn't know that, you're welcome. And I can read the view model, and here, now I can change whatever I want. I want you to be able to see it. So I could change complete filter to, I'll just change it to empty string, and then I'll go back to showing everything. And then if I change it to complete, it'll show just complete ones. You can see the DOM updates. Okay, cool. All right, next thing we need to do is make it so we can filter due date. Now this one's a little bit trickier. It's going to be a little bit longer. But I think it's cool because CanJS supports all of the common MongoDB operators. So like fixture supports them, kind of support it all the way through CanJS. Its model layer, all the greater than, less than stuff. So if I wanted to, for instance, get all to-dos that are like due today, I would ask for all to-dos greater than or equal to today and less than tomorrow. People familiar with Mongo here? Some people? Yeah. So this should make total sense. By the way, this object format is based off JSON API. If anybody's familiar with that, it's for your RESTful service layer. It is a standard specification for building APIs in JSON. If you're not already on the GraphQL train and you've got some RESTful services that you need to design, this is a good pattern to follow. Okay, so well, GraphQL is kind of, it's not, you're not building REST services if you set up GraphQL. So JSON API is a spec for like how to format your RESTful services, right? REST has like especially the queries. So REST doesn't really talk about like what a query object should necessarily look like, but JSON API does provide a specification. And it looks like this. Well, these aren't, it doesn't go into detail on what these should be, but it does talk about like using filter and property and then some type of signal for how that should be filtered. Okay. So what we need to do is really, when people are selecting the due date, we need to essentially translate either we need to translate today or this week into a range that the server understands. So I'm going to steal this code because it's a lot, and I'll just kind of do some hand waving to explain what it's doing. Some space here. So all this is doing is we're going to set up the do filter property to work in a moment to be set by a select. But all this is really doing is if do filter was set to today, it's creating a JavaScript date that is today, serializing that to a string, and another one by basically subtracting out 1 day's worth of time, or adding 1 day of time and getting another date string that way. And then if it's a week, it's basically doing the same thing, except it's just multiplying 7 times day to kind of create that range. So let me get the code to actually wire up do filter for the due date filtering. So let's wrong one. And again, if I wanted to like, oh man, I got so much, let me see what I have to do today. That is, that's not, oh, I forgot the property. There is an error. Like if I open up the console, it'll say, hey, do filter doesn't exist. What are you trying to set that? But it doesn't, it's not defined. Okay, so now I can see everything that's due today that is incomplete. And there were multiple, I could sort it by name. So that's all the major stuff that you would want to do in terms of like grid controls a lot of times. So now we've done a lot. We've really hit the R hard in Crud. Now let's get those other 3 letters. Create, delete, and update. And we'll start with delete because that's the easiest one. I'm going to add a destroy button to each of my records. So each to-do, while I'm looping through it, I'm going to add a new column. Oh, I've got the TD. Okay, so I've added the delete button. Now, when we added all of the, like, we supercharged our model essentially with the ability to actually create and delete data on the server, it added a destroy method. So here's that destroy method, and we can call it, and it's actually going to try to delete that to-do on the server. So it's calling it, but notice that it didn't, the UI didn't change, right? And this is where, like, if you're using another framework, you would have to figure out some mechanic to, like, either remove that to-do from your list of to-dos. Well, that's basically what you have to figure out, and that can be annoying and tricky to get right, or slow. It could be linearly loop through. Typically, won't be that part of your, it won't be that slow, but it's still something. So we want this to actually destroy. Also, one note, you see this is destroying. That's another method that's added that lets you know while it's being destroyed, while it's being deleted. And you can see it changes, and then it changes back when it's done being deleted. So that's some other functionality you get when you add that mix in to make this into like a model. But we want a little bit more power. We want it to be able to manage this list automatically for us. Almost, well, like, you know, people might have used, what's the real-time framework that everybody uses? Someone help me out. The real-time framework that basically has mini Mongo in it and
Meteor?
Meteor, right? So CanJS, like Meteor, has automatic list management, but it's done in a much cooler way. You know, and if anybody knows a Meteor person, I would be happy to have that debate here about that. He uses essentially set theory to know what is in and out of a set. But this isn't part of the default REST model. This is part of the real-time REST model. So I just need to change this to real-time REST model. And even though we don't have a real-time connection, it's still, and I just changed this from REST model to mixing in the real-time REST model behavior. Oh, actually, real-time. That's why it's breaking. Real-time. Freezing. Oh, real-time REST model. Okay. There we go. Okay, so now with real-time REST model, it's monitoring every model instance in the page, and as it changes or is deleted, it updates lists automatically. So now when we hit delete, it'll just remove that item. And this is really nice when we're about to start doing like updates. So now we've done the D and the R, so we have U and C. So let's do the U. So we're going to update use complete property. We're going to make it so that we can edit this, or we can change the complete property by clicking this checkbox. And one also cool thing I think about it is if we show, let's say we're all in the complete ones, we're just showing complete. You check this, it'll remove it because it's no longer complete. It's incomplete. So that again is the real-time list management feature of CanJS. So let's make that work. To make that work, what we really need is a input that is connected to the to-dos complete property. And then also when that input changes, we're going to call save on the to-do, which updates the to-do on the server. So let me get that in for a moment. And the final. So instead of just writing out true or false, I'm going to write out this. Let me get rid of this for 1 second and bring that back in a moment. So here, it's actually, you can't, part of the issue right now is you can't actually see that it's working unless you turn on the console to see that the server, the fixtures are actually being hit. So it is making AJAX requests. So it works, hooray. And if we did the filtering, if we just sorted everything by complete and unchecked, these things get removed automatically for us. So we can see it's working, but again, I like to disable form controls, or at least give people a signal that it's working, so they don't and prevent it from, right now it's gonna make 1,000 requests. Okay, we just made, it's going crazy, right? I'm sure some of these are coming back as errors here. They can come out of order. But we would have broken the server for sure, if not can't fixture. So let's fix that. Make it so that this is disabled until they actually want it. So I'm going to do I want to set the disabled property on this input when we should prevent save. Now this method we're going to have to implement to do a little validation for when we start working at creating it to do. But I'm just going to implement the method right now for our uses. So this I want to not allow us to save if we are currently actually saving or deleting the to-do. So I'm going to add a method here, a little helper method, called prevent save. And all this is going to do here is if we don't have a name, we shouldn't be able to save. And if we are saving, well, we shouldn't be able to save. And if we're destroying, we shouldn't be able to save. So this little helper function is going to make it so that, you can see it's disabled. You might not be able to see it because it's kind of small, but it is disabled now when we click it. So now we can't click 1,000 times. And also what I really like is if we hit delete here, a person can't very quickly go and click on that because you can see it becomes disabled when I click on delete. Any questions about that? Makes sense? Right. Almost makes too much sense. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing, but with the due dates. I want to make it so that you can edit the due dates. And also significantly, as we saw, when I change the due date, and if I'm sorted by date, I want it to move that record to where it belongs. That's kind of tricky stuff, but CanJS makes it easy. Let's see here. So again, we need an input, and I'm going to use a date control, a native date control. So here is we're writing out the date. Instead of this TD here, I want this input. And let's see what this input is doing. What this input is doing is creating a date input. I don't know if everybody knows this. I like this feature a lot. For number inputs and for date inputs, they support value as some other type here. Date inputs support value as date. So you can actually get a real date type from it. Yeah. A lot of people don't know that, but that's actually by far the most convenient way of getting an actual date instance. You don't have to take the value, which is a string, and format that yourself. It does it for you. So I'm connecting this input to two-way binding the value of date on this input to the to-do's due date. So in this, when one of these changes, it's going to update the to-do's due date. And then also, we're listening to change as well, which we'll call save on the to-do, updating the to-do. And then I'm also preventing people from manipulating this while it's, we should be preventing save, which is like while it's being deleted or something like that. It's being disabled. So let's see what I think is the really cool feature, the hard thing to make work. I'm going to, again, sort by due dates. I'm going to show like a bunch of items. And then I'm just going to show that, like, hey, if I change this to like the 20th, do car to the 20th, save, and then it gets moved down to the right spot. All right. So now we've done U, and then the final one is the C, the create. Create. All we're going to do is create a new component, a to-do create component, and that will just create items. But again, because of the real-time list management, those items will just appear in the list if they belong in the list. So here, I'm going to create a, add this to my HTML. And then I've got to define the behavior of that component, which is all the way down here, and I will talk about how this works in a moment. Pretty much the same thing we've seen. So this added that create to-dos at the bottom. We can type in a name. Let me try to do one that's sorted by due date. 20. And I'll only show complete ones. This is so show that this works. Oh, I'll make it only do this one. Okay, so if I make, these are all of my, actually let's do incomplete. This is like, oh, I got a busy week. So let's make it to do. And I want it to appear kind of in the right spot. I'll make something on the 24th, the 25th. Yes. And it can't be, well, I'll make CanJS 1. This one will be complete, but it won't appear in there. So I got created. Oh. CanJS 2. It should not appear. Okay, the complete one did not appear, but the incomplete one did in the right spot. Okay, so let me explain how this actually works. In some ways, it's easier to view here. I have a form that's listening to on submit, and so we call it create to do method. The form has a it's tied to a to-do's name. Like I actually kind of create a to-do that's not saved. This is almost like this right here is saying the to-do property make just a new instance of to-do. That's why it's capital will be default, because it'll just do new to-do, and then create a temporary placeholder instance of to-do that we will eventually save when create to-do is created. So all the form is doing is when someone writes in this input, it's writing the to-do's name. It's writing to the to-do's name, and when they check this checkbox, it's writing to its complete, and when they pick a date, it's writing to the to-do's due date. And then again, when they hit to-do create, all we do is we prevent the normal submission of the form, we save the to-do, and then all we need to do is create a new placeholder to-do so that we can keep creating a new to-do every time. The only other interesting thing, I think, is, again, we're disabling actually submitting while, print save is true, and we toggle from showing creating to create to do. Right? That's that whole deleting thing that I find that I like so much in a mature application. So that's it. We just built the full application. Are there any questions?
Can you nest components?
Oh yeah. So you could put, yeah. So we could take this out here. We could take this out here. You would want to define. It's a little weirder when, for performance reasons, you want to define your whatever your outer one is last. Typically, is how you do it. So that because auto mounting is auto mounting is relatively slow. So the right way to do this is to move to do create before. Did it delete to do create? Oh, what happened? Just copy it one more time, I guess. So, yeah, that works totally fine. And components can pass each other data as well. They kind of works just like just this exact same syntax that we're doing here. You can connect or two-way bind, one-way bind either direction a value in a child component to a value in a parent. And you can listen to events in the same way. That on whatever, if the parent is producing like an event, you can listen to it that way. Any other questions?
Why do you do the name at the end?
Say that again? Yeah. Oh, you want to look at that code?
Yeah.
Let's look at it here. Yeah. Which part? The create?
Yeah.
This part?
Yeah, so why is the last this?
Well, because we created that to do,
Right.
and now we want to reset our form for a new to do to be created. All right, cool. Conclusion stuff. DoneJS Chicago is meeting. Yeah. We're talking about debugging tools. CanJS actually has supremely powerful debugging tools now in 4.0 and 5.0. I do want to make a quick pitch. We'll be going through kind of a guide just similar to what we went through right now. But it does show what I think. I just do want to show off one of the new cool features of it. So if you ever found yourself in a situation like, man, I've got this, what changes me, I've got this element here, I have no idea what changes like this element, what's causing this element to change. What CanJS allows now is you can, it's going to be a little bit pop this out. So like that element, is like what is that? What if you trace through the DOM or whatever? What properties? Oh no. If you trace through, like, I want to know what causes this, what changes me to change. I have no idea. Now with CanJS, I can just get my Windows to work here. Show this amazing feature. Okay, so this will this can actually trace. So that H2 element is derived from the application view models Brad and Nils brought. And it can even do it in more complex examples, which I think that's actually clicking the wrong link. The one that I really want to show, which is this one. Very similar idea. Oh wait, one of these inputs, some of these inputs change the first and last property on the application view model, and I could like manually change that, but even even cooler, I can get my application view model now. I'm going to get my application view model and ask, hey, what changes your first property? And it will trace it all the way to the actual input elements that are causing, like it traces it all the way through all, when you have components. Who uses Vue here? Anybody use Vue? Like, I kind of use it. Like, or even React. Like, it can be very hard to track, like, this changes this changes this changes this, and it results in, like, the application. Now, we haven't, like, perfected, I would say, the graphical interface for it yet, because it's still a lot to read. But we're going to be going through this and how to use it. This allows you to say, like, well, the first property is actually transformed through all these different components, and eventually its real value is coming from this input here. And you can actually trace it both ways. So stuff like that we're going to be going through. We'll be going through at that meetup. If you're interested in seeing some powerful debugging tools, please join us. Thank you, everybody, for watching or listening to me.
Yeah, about right. Right, thank you, Justin. Thanks for everybody for coming out. We are always looking for talks at all levels. If people can come tonight, we can come to something else for dinner or something. So all kinds of topics, all kinds of levels. Any meetup page, you have a link to a submit form that lets you feedback, all that. So if you're looking at anything cool or just you want to get something, teach a basic JavaScript